Sunday's saving grace, though, was Randy Rhoads, who is by no means a good guitarist, but is also not Black Sabbath's Tony Iommi, whose guitar as an oral torture device drives laboratory mice to suicide. This is so interesting because when you take these things in hindsight, this album has staying power now, 40 plus years later. Crazy Train alone still resonates. So this thing had a massive staying power, and Randy Rhoads, in retrospect, and a lot of people knew it at the time, was one of the great guitarists of that era. And here's this guy poo-pooing all of it, looking at Randy Rhoads going, he's not as bad as Iommi was. But the truth is, Tony Iommi was fantastic in his own way. One thing that's interesting also in here, and I want to give this guy credit for even saying it, is that he used the word, he said, dare I say, growth. Because one of the interesting things that happened with both things, with Black Sabbath when Dio comes in, and then Ozzy hooking up with Randy Rhoads and his new, Blizzard of Oz band, they both interestingly grew. Now, you don't have to like Ozzy's solo stuff as much as the Black Sabbath stuff, and I love the old Black Sabbath stuff with Ozzy, but you have to realize that from a musician standpoint, there was actual real growth in the music. It changed, it progressed in some ways. Now, you might say it regressed in the output, but the skill set behind it definitely, it just increased. When you look at this album, when you look at the next album, because Randy Rhoads forced that band to get better, the band that Ozzy was with, and he probably in some ways forced Ozzy to step up his game. And you listen to Geezer Butler, Tony Iommi, they talk about Dio the same way. Bringing him into the band at that point forced them to step up their game. And a lot of times that stuff's needed. You have a band like Black Sabbath that really by the end of that first Ozzy, the first Ozzy era, had gotten a little stale. And so when he says growth here, he's right, because sometimes you have to have that. You have to introduce these new elements. You have to force yourself out of that situation that's become stale and force yourself to deal and work with a guy like Randy Rhoads, and you become a better person or a better performer or a better player or a better singer or whatever because of it. And on the other hand, the same thing with Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler and Bill Ward, having to now have somebody like Dio walk in, where Dio is a lyricist and he plays instruments, which Ozzy never wasn't really involved with that part of it. It forced them to step up their game, and they'll be the first ones to tell you that.